Hello, Possum Pack. Welcome in. We are going to talk about dire wolves because dire wolves are all the rage right now. Why, you ask? If you don't know, then let me catch you up. I'm going to do just a tiny little bit for you. Colossal Biosciences claims to have successfully resurrected the dire wolf through a process of de-extinction, creating 3 pups that are essentially genetically engineered gray wolves with dire wolf characteristics. These pups, Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi, wink wink, obvious where they're getting the publicity, were born in October 2024 and January 2025 after embryos were transferred to surrogate dogs. But these are gray wolves, you argue. These aren't dire wolves. Well, in my opinion, you're correct. But, in science opinion, everybody has their own idea of what species even means, the definition of the word. Let me explain. Several models and concepts attempt to define what constitutes a species, including the biological species concept, morphological species concept, and phylogenetic species concept. These models offer different ways to group organisms based on factors like if they can interbreed, if they have a similar physical appearance, if they have a similar or the same evolutionary history and can interbreed in both of those. There's also whether or not their genetics are the same, or like the one Colossal claims, the ecological concept. And yes, this means they fill a niche, the ecological niche of the direwolf, which they wouldn't because the direwolf went extinct and the gray wolf did not. They were around the same time, more on that later. First, if you want to learn more about these concepts, I recommend Clint's Reptile Room, I think? But Clint's Reptiles was definitely the one I watched on YouTube to learn more about these species concepts, and it's a pretty interesting idea. Now, I'm playing ARK Survival Ascended, and in here I have pet direwolves, and that made me wonder, do you think that humans had pet direwolves? I hope they did, and I think that if I was a human 10,000 years ago and I saw a direwolf, I'd be like, hey, look, you want a bone? Here, I'd toss them a bone. And just like gray wolves, they would have self-domesticated. Because guess what? Native Americans and direwolves both lived 10,000 years ago, and it was not unlikely that they encountered each other, maybe even interacted with each other. Now, it is claimed it's highly unlikely that humans domesticated direwolves. While direwolves shared some physical similarities with gray wolves and dogs, they were a distinct species with a different evolutionary trajectory. There's no evidence of successful interbreeding or domestication between direwolves and other canids. So, the whole evidence of not having direwolves as pets as a Native American or them interbreeding is because it's unlikely based on what? The tiny little bit of DNA that Colossal managed to get? I'm dubious. I would have wanted a direwolf if I was a Native American. There's no TV, there's no Game of Thrones, but I still would have wanted a direwolf. Let's continue on this little bit of a road on this direwolf rage here. Now, genetic evidence indicates that direwolves did evolve in North America and were a distinct canid lineage, while gray wolves and coyotes later migrated from Eurasia into North America, just like humans. Direwolves appear to have been unable to interbreed with them, suggesting a significant evolutionary separation. Again, the evidence of that is simply based on what they looked like and the assumption that because they were a different genus, they couldn't interbreed. I can tell you that this is why species concept exists, because none of them are perfect, and it turns out that some species of different genus can interbreed with others, like the camel and the llama, called a kama. Yeah, look that up. That's a fun rabbit hole to go down. But let's say you are a Native American. Did Native Americans have dogs before European contact? Yes, Native Americans had dogs long before European contact. Evidence of dogs in the Americas dates back to 9,000 to 10,000 years BC. About the same as direwolves. indicating they arrived with early human migration from Eurasia. These early dogs were distinct from the European breeds that later arrived with colonists that were related to the Eurasian gray wolf, not the American gray wolf, which is still unsure if the Native American dogs were completely Eurasian gray wolf descendants or if they were American gray wolf descendants or a mix of the two, which is way more likely if you know dogs and how people like to breed dogs nowadays, which I don't think people change that much. Let's continue with this rage rave little party we're having, and like direwolves, chase this rabbit right down its hole. So how do we know that Native Americans had dogs before the European settlers brought their own dogs from the Old World? Well, it's technically correct to say that canine transmissible venereal tumor, CTVT, is the oldest living cancer. This breeding transmitted cancer in dogs is estimated to have originated in a single dog approximately 11,000 years ago. Yeah, that's older than the last known living direwolf. What makes it unique is that it can be transmitted between dogs through contact, and the cancer cells themselves have persisted for millennia. If I remember right in my own studies, it can be transmitted through bites or breeding, or any other sort of genetic DNA contact, such as, if you backwash if you drink after them. If they drink at the same pond, maybe, I don't know. I doubt that. It has to be direct contact. Here's why it's considered the oldest. Transmissibility. Unlike most cancers that originate in a single cell and then spread, CTVT is passed from one dog to another via contact, meaning the cancerous cells themselves have survived and reproduced for at least 11,000 years. Age of the cancer. Researchers have estimated that the first dog with CTVT lived around 11,000 years ago based on the number of mutations found in the cancer's genome. Back to that genetics again, according to a study published in Science. Persistence. The cancer cells continue to exist in dogs today, even though the original dog is long gone. Now, you might wonder, or maybe you know, what am I playing for this video? I'm playing ARK Survival Ascended, where you create genetic variations in the direwolves with the steampunk pack. The Bob's Tall Tales steampunk, that's how I'm doing this. I am currently riding a direwolf, which you might notice looks a lot like the direwolves Colossal Bioscience Labs have made the direwolves 2.0, which aren't actually direwolves, but kind of are if you think about the model and if you think about reverse engineering. Because all canines came from the same ancestor genetically. Couldn't, theoretically, they reverse engineer into direwolves? Well, you'd say that branch split, the genetics mutated, and no, they can't. But can they reverse engineer them to be as close to what direwolves could have been like? Yeah, they could. Did they? No, they didn't. But is it still cool? Yes, it is. Using CRISPR and some other technologies, that stuff is amazing. Maybe we could get armadillos one day. Maybe we could de-extinct the hyenodon. Maybe we can make cave wolves. The hairless things to the right there. See them? Yeah. We already have dogs that look a lot like those. They're called the Xolo dogs. And, funny enough, they're claimed to be Native American dogs. But they did not match the genetic evidence. They actually may not be the original Xolo dogs that were claimed to be original Native American dogs because their genetics didn't match the CTVT genetics, where they actually had proof of the oldest living dog. Funny enough that the Xolo dogs are hairless, look like a cave wolf, they bark like a cave wolf, but they're not a cave wolf because they're not in a video game about cave wolves. I digress. My point is, dire wolves are what we call dire wolves. Are they the dire wolves that we found fossils of? No. Is it possible that we genetically engineered these guys to resemble dire wolves? Maybe. We don't know. We know more about saber-tooths than we do dire wolves. What we do know is that at one point they shared a common ancestor. Another thing we do know, that genetic engineering is totally a possibility. Is it scary, like in a Michael Crichton book about dinosaurs escaping, kind of like this video game? No, it's not. Do you know why? Because if you have a dog and you look over at it, you're looking at a genetically engineered gray wolf. That dog is 99% genetically identical to a gray wolf. Their behavior, their socialization is what makes them not a gray wolf. If you were to take a genetic test and you did not have the most expensive laboratories, such as Colossal Biosciences, you would hardly be able to tell the difference between a dog DNA and a gray wolf DNA. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe someday we'll have pet direwolves. Maybe, going down that rabbit hole, there is a possibility, slight, unlikely possibility, that the dog sitting beside you is actually part direwolf already, before we've even intended it. Let's chew on that a little bit. Have a good day, Possum Pack. Well, did some of you stick around? I have a bonus fact for you. One dog breed, a few, but one in particular, proved to be one of the original lines of the Native American dog breeds from pre-European colonial settlement. Do you know what dog breed this was? And no, I don't mean the CTVT, which I've already said is technically a dog, but technically isn't. This dog breed, this ancient Native American dog breed, is the Chihuahua. No, not all Chihuahuas, but it was the N.A. Chihuahua. Yeah. Cool bonus fact, right? Tell me if you liked this video. Like if you did. Subscribe if you want to see more. And tell me in the comments what you want to see a video in this format of next. Go pet your Chihuahua, Gray Wolf, Dire Wolf. Have fun. Bye, Possum Pack.